New Orleans Saints' new offensive coordinator, Klint Kubiak, is changing things already on the Saints offense, and in my opinion, he's doing it for the better. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, we got some more of our biggest notes from minicamp in terms of what was open to the media on Saturday. We're going to take a look at the Saints also continuing to add to their offensive line, how Andrew Janocko is already having a vocal impact, the New Orleans Saints' new quarterback coach. And we're going to kick everything off with a look at the New Orleans Saints' new offensive coordinator, Klint Kubiak, and how things have already begun to change. And if you ask me, they're changing for the better. We got all that and much more coming up for you on today's episode. We appreciate you very much for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day, every day, and of course, for being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more right now. New customers will get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. New Orleans Saints' new offensive coordinator, Klint Kubiak, already is making a noticeable difference in New Orleans Saints practices, and that's where we're going to kick things off today. If I were to try to come up with 4 words, if you'll accept up-tempo with a hyphen as one word, if I were to try to come up with 4 words to describe what the New Orleans Saints offensive side and really defensive side, thanks to guys like Joe Woods and Marcus Robertson and all them over on that side of the football, and Michael Hodges, of course, to describe sort of what practice felt like on Saturday when we were out there, the 4 words that I would choose would be vocal or loud, whichever one you like there, intense, precise, and up-tempo. Those are not the way that I would describe practices for the past few years that I've been present for in the New Orleans Saints facility, if I'm just being honest. And that's no shade at how things were handled before. It's not to say that things are being handled worse or better now. It's simply to say that things are just different right now. And maybe it's, the fact that we got out there the second day that they were out on the field, and maybe there was just some excitement, intensity, things like that. But I'm getting the feeling that that's not the case. If you go and listen to Klint Kubiak's conversation with media after minicamp practice, you're going to find a guy that's not really here for the spotlight. He comes off as a guy that's not here to create clicks. He's not here for content. He's not here for engagement. He's here for production on the football field. And I think that you could definitely see that when he was out on the field. I mentioned in one of my bigger observations in yesterday's episode and kind of the quick hit episode that I did, highlighting what we took away on the day of that open portion of rookie minicamp, that his demeanor is very different on the field than it has been in front of the cameras. And I have a lot of respect for that. This isn't a guy that's here to try to go viral. This isn't a guy that's here to try to give everybody a good clip. This is a guy that's here to try to win football games. And I have a lot of respect for that. So how are you getting closer to that? I think that a big first part of that, out of those 4 words that I chose, I'll start with intensity. I talked about the vocal nature of it, but the intensity of the practice felt like it was high stakes. Like you couldn't get anything wrong. Like there were eyes on you. And you'll remember going back to just a couple of years ago, Mark Ingram talking to Sean Payton, about practices and look, fumbles and stuff like that. Like, that wouldn't be happening if you were around, coach, and those kinds of things. Alvin Kamara calling to task the coaching staff and the way the practice was being handled about how if you see something, you have to say something when it comes to practices and stuff like that. This was very different because it felt like every little thing was seen between Klint Kubiak and Andrew Janocko and Keith Williams over on the offensive side, John Benton getting work in with the offensive linemen as well. Clancy Barone, of course, working with the tight ends. You could feel all of that from each of these coaches, that the precision is absolutely there, which is my kind of third word. But the up-tempo part of it was the other thing that I really liked, because the up-tempo part wasn't just about, is their offense feeling up-tempo, or is the tempo of the offense feeling comfortable, which it was. But the other part of it was just them getting through things and not lollygagging, not wasting time in between snaps. I can't say that I saw that previously, but I can say that it stood out that it wasn't there this time. So those are the things that I kind of wanted to highlight there. But the up-tempo part kind of brings me over to the scheme. Like, what did we see differently on the football field? I know you want to know that. And if I'm being honest, there were a lot of things that we saw differently out on the football field, particularly over on the offensive side of the football. Now, we got to remember, minicamp, you're installing an offense. You're probably running a lot of the same plays over and over again. Things like that certainly look that way. You're working on particular concepts, route combinations, run plans, run fits on the defense, all these other things. So it's a lot of repetition. But even with all that repetition, we saw stretch runs to the outside, running backs getting to outside of the tackles, running backs getting to outside of the tight ends. We were watching offensive linemen pull, move off the ball, all those other things. We were seeing the stretch play action rollouts that accompanied that style of run game as well. I mean, when you think about a standard drop back play action going from under center with a single back running back behind you, it's a straight drop back with a straight, fake to the inside for that run and then coming right back up and then surveying the field. The other version of this is where the entire offense is moving to what looks like the run play side, let's call it the right side, where if you're the quarterback, you're stretching out, trying to fake that handoff, pulling the ball back into your gut, rolling over your inside shoulder, and then starting to run over to the back side of the play, the left side, and looking for plays on routes that are opening up over on the backside of where the run looked like it was going. So it's just a different style of play action. But if you're a team that is constantly doing straight drop back handoffs, inside zone runs, man scheme, gap scheme, power runs up the middle, all those other things, the stretch play action, if the stretch run's not a part of your offense, then the stretch play action rollout can't be a part of your offense. Like that's all about sequencing and complementing your offense and all these other things. And so when you add in the outside zone runs and you add in, the potential tosses, you can run the play fake off the toss as well. You add in the stretch runs and things like that, then it diversifies your play action looks as well. Doesn't mean you go completely away from the inside zone runs, the power runs up the middle, the dive runs up the middle, and then therefore the straight drop back play actions and things like that. That still gets to be a part of your offense. But now you just added another layer of that, or two, depending upon how deep you want to go with it, in terms of what you're adding there. So we did see a lot of that. And I think you'll be pleased to hear, and this should be no surprise at all, just if you watch Klint Kubiak's offense with the Minnesota Vikings back in 2021, there's a lot of pre-snap motion. So this gives you an opportunity as a quarterback to be able to kind of see how things end up developing. The motion ends up creating an identification aspect for the quarterback. If a wide receiver goes in motion from the right side of the field to the left side of the field and the cornerback follows him from one side to the other, it's man coverage. If the wide receiver goes in motion, but then no corner follows, but the defense maybe shifts a little bit heavily to where they're going or where there are more receivers, whatever their rules might be, probably looking at zone coverage, all of those things. And then off the snap, you know what to read, you know what to look for. So I feel like all of those things that you wanted to see and that we were asking questions about last year and the year before and all those other things, it just feels like it was there for this one day that we got to see. Let's see if they can pull it off over the course of 18 games. If they can install it over the course of training camp and all these other things, there's still many, many questions to ask. But if you wanted to know whether or not the Saints were getting off on the right foot when it comes to introducing their new scheme, it certainly looked like it to me. And I credit a lot of that to Klint Kubiak. Another coach that I'm giving a lot of credit to right now is quarterback coach Andrew Janocko. He might have been one of the hardest working guys on that field, on the offensive side of the field on Saturday. Let me explain to you a little bit about the impact that he had, how it is that he was showing what that impact was, and how things are just operating a little bit differently. We're going to go through all of that as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is the same formula that keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything that you need to be able to maintain your vehicles and even level it up to peak performance. Whether you're looking for superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, whatever it is that you want, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 parts and accessories for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for over at ebaymotors.com. And with eBay's guaranteed fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your car the first time, every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. You want to check them out? You absolutely have to. ebaymotors.com. You're going to be able to get all the parts that you need at the prices that you want to make sure that you're getting your car up to that MVP level and bringing home some huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive today at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. And eBay guarantee fit available only to U.S. customers. All right, family. Andrew Janocko, the New Orleans Saints' new quarterbacks coach, has had an impact that's already visible and that is hard to miss out on the field. We very much appreciate you being here for another episode of Locked On Saints. Don't forget to go and check out the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 stream over on YouTube as well. The first ever national sports 24/7 stream available on YouTube. You can also find it for free on the Amazon Fire TV channels app, getting all of the biggest stories from around the local or around the world of sports from the local experts that cover your favorite teams every single day, just like we do here at Locked On Saints. Go and check it out today. Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or on that free Amazon Fire TV channels app. You're going to be able to find that as a part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So I wanted to highlight Andrew Janocko because he was the guy that I felt like maybe was the hardest work, not the hardest working, but maybe the busiest guy out there, right? Everybody's working hard. I don't ever want to diminish anybody by over crediting somebody or anything like that. I want to be very careful about that. I like to be respectful in that way. But I do want to give Andrew Janocko a lot of credit for what we saw. Working side by side with Klint Kubiak, as well as on his own, giving corrections and adjustments to the quarterbacks, not only in between reps, but even during reps. He was helping with play calling as well, and he was helping the quarterbacks kind of diagnose coverages. You could tell that they were installing plays because you could see them kind of working on plays, working on like an individual set of plays in a variety of different ways. If you think about like, trying to learn how to play a song on a piano or something like that, you learn individual notes first. You get an idea of like what the piano keys all sound like and all that. Then you start to learn scales and everything. And you're probably learning, specific types of scales. And then you're trying to learn all your different like combinations and chords and things like that. Then eventually you get to the points where you're mimicking and learning somebody else's songs, and you'll eventually grow with your own ornamentation and things like that before you start eventually writing your own songs. And so I probably butchered that a little bit. Forgive me for all of the like concert pianists out there that listen to the show. But just as like a rough overlay, right? You learn by scaffolding is what it's called, right? This is what we called it when I was teaching and all those other things. You learn, addition and subtraction and multiplication. Then you start to learn like, putting all those things together into larger algebraic equations. And then those inform you when you get to calculus, trigonometry, all these other things. And so you could see the scaffolding going on with Andrew Janocko and the two quarterbacks that were out there working. Spencer Rattler, of course, the Saints' 5th round pick and rookie, along with Kellen Mond, who the team had waived last week, but then brought back on a tryout basis for minicamps with Derek Carr, Jake Haener, and Nathan Peterman, all not participating in rookie minicamps. Not surprising. Rookie minicamps is what it sounds like. It's typically rookies, and then you might have some veteran guys out there on a tryout basis, but that's pretty much it. So so what you saw was them, starting off first by just, taking a snap from, a coach and then dropping back and maybe delivering a pass to another, coach that was out there to kind of play the hands guy and all that. Then they kind of leveled that up to moving over off to the side where it was a little bit quieter. And with Andrew Janocko standing in between them, facing them, kind of going through play calls and then snapping the ball, doing the drop back that is appropriate with that play call. Sometimes 3 steps, sometimes 5 steps, sometimes deeper drop, all those other things. And then sometimes we were in shotgun rather than under center. All those other pieces too were a part of that. And then taking that and then ended up moving to this kind of next level where you're making the play call, but as a part of the play call, Janocko is actually behind the quarterback saying, okay, here's the coverage, 2 deep. It's 3 high, 4 under, all these other things. And then there are coaches standing at landmarks where you would expect a receiver to be running their route, right? To where their route would end, where you would want to hit them. And based on the coverage that Janocko is saying to them, they're throwing to the option that fits that coverage. And so they're mentally kind of going through that process of knowing what a defense looks like and all that. So it kind of tests them in that way and making sure that they're making the right decisions based upon the coverage that they're seeing. I think that like a lot of times fans and media, we come up to, the idea of like when a quarterback makes a decision to throw the football by watching a receiver to see if that receiver gets open. And if that receiver doesn't get open, then you have to look and find another open receiver. And that's not really the case. The quarterback is dropping back, and the first thing they're actually looking at is not the receivers. They're looking at the defense. If the defense is too high, then that must mean and that there's a post route, then okay, there might be something over the top in between those two safeties, in between those two high safeties. If the defense is 3 high and 4 under, then you might know, okay, I might need to check down here because that's going to take away the middle of the field deep. And there's a lot of action here underneath. So maybe I can go to the intermediate level, somebody over the middle where there's a gap between the 2 linebackers that are splitting the half of the field or something like that. So what you're really looking at first is the defense. And again, that was a crude explanation, so please forgive me, but for the sake of time, that's the way that I'll explain it. So I think that running through those mental reps makes a lot of sense. And so seeing them sort of not only taking those reps, but also kind of being challenged in that way. Like, do you know how to make the right decision based upon the coverage that you're being given? Then they go from that to kind of graduating into routes on air, where they actually have the receivers running the routes. They'll run the individual routes first. Then they'll all run the route concept together where you have the multiple routes. And then you graduate from that into 7-on-7s and then into team drills. And then you're actually running the plays. And so I liked the structure of that. It felt like that. It sounds like that's a lot of work. And it is, right? It is a lot of work. But look, the Saints did a good job getting through all of that while also getting special teams reps in there where, they're off to the side, maybe continuing to throw a football, but they're not doing more practice at that point. They're kind of resting up a little bit and all that. They're at least resting from team drills and all those pieces. And so they were also still mixing in some of the special teams drills and all these other things. And so they managed the time super, super well. And a lot of that was because Andrew Janocko was just like pushing and pushing and pushing. Do this, do that. Don't forget your footwork, even though don't worry about that or whatever, even though you're not actually taking a full drop back, you don't have a pass rush coming at you. Do this 100%. Watch your footwork. Be aware of this. Get through your progressions. Finish your progressions. No, there are no wide receivers running these routes right now. Still read your progressions, like all these other things. And so I had a lot of respect for what we were watching there. And that was kind of that vocal work with the quarterbacks rather, that I mentioned. And then the attention to detail. I mean, you just heard the way that I laid that out. And I'm the idiot in this equation. Like they're the smart ones in this equation. I'm the dum-dum and everything. And I sounded like I had an attention to detail with everything that was going on. And I do have an attention to detail. It is a part of what I do. But not like them having to actually execute these things. And so I had mad respect for what we saw from all of that. So I really enjoyed Janocko kind of coming in with like a new structure, it felt like, or, at least something that was overtly challenging to these quarterbacks that allowed them to build their knowledge to a point to where when they got out on the field, they were very comfortable. Spencer Rattler looked extremely comfortable by the time that they got to team drills. And that's not just because Spencer Rattler did well under the pressure, but because he was prepared properly, right? Like we can't give him all of that. We got to give Klint Kubiak and Andrew Janocko and the wide receivers coaches and Clancy Barone with the tight ends and the offensive line coaching. We got to give all of them credit because one of the reasons why he didn't look flustered is because everyone just looked prepared on the offensive side. Everybody looked prepared on the defensive side too, but that's less surprise, or not less surprising, but that's not a change, right? The defense has always kind of like had that part in the bag. It's been the offense that we've been like looking at, and that's going through all the changes and everything like that. And I just thought they were extremely prepared by the time that they got there. Now, will this translate to wins? Will this translate to the Saints being perfect? No, probably not. Or it won't translate to them being perfect. We'll have to see if it translates to wins. But again, if you wanted to know if they were starting off on the right foot, it certainly looked like it just the second day in to rookie minicamp. So I just wanted to kind of highlight and give you a little bit of a glimpse behind the curtain here as to like how finite the work is, how precise, how detailed the work is that's being put in. Because it was probably my favorite thing that I got to see between what we just talked about with Klint Kubiak and then now also what we're discussing here with Andrew Janocko. And then you heard some of, and if you haven't, you can go back to last episode and hear what I had to say about Coach Dub, Keith Williams, and his work with the wide receivers, because it was just as precise. Clancy Barone always has been precise. We broke down his kind of installation process last year and all that, which I'll review again before we get into training camps. But it's just awesome. Like it was really, really cool to see. So I just wanted to give those flowers while we still could. Hey, also, beyond all that, the New Orleans Saints, just as much as they're being precise and maximizing their options when it comes to the offense, they're being precise and maximizing their options on the offensive line as well. Saints signing another offensive lineman. What does it mean? What could we see this offensive line look like? And how Lucas Patrick, the new signee, could potentially fit in. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, our official sports betting partners here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's winner take all season here in the NBA and in the NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. We have seen some fantastic play in the NBA playoffs. The Boston Celtics and the Cleveland Cavaliers have been endlessly exciting. Anthony Edwards has been incredible with the Minnesota Timberwolves going up against and playing well mostly up against the Denver Nuggets. It has been an awesome NBA playoffs, and it can get even awesomer for you, especially if it's your first time heading over to FanDuel. Because right now, new customers will get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet as your first bet. That's $150 that you can then spend on spreads, money lines, player props, and much more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. The New Orleans Saints have not stopped tinkering with their offensive line, although I think they could solve their problem with one simple signing. But beyond that, it's not like they have gone to sleep on the position group whatsoever. Adding another offensive lineman, we're going to discuss that offensive lineman, Lucas Patrick, how he potentially fits in, what this means for the New Orleans Saints, and how they can continue to bolster the position. We appreciate you very much, as always, for being here with us. Don't forget, we are your team every day. So we'll be right back here with you on tomorrow's episode. Gonna dive in a little bit more into the scheme conversation. You heard me talk a little bit about how the install went, what some of the things that we saw that were different from this Klint Kubiak offense, all those things. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into that in terms of how all that translates out onto the field and practice in the regular season as well. So I hope you will be ready for that tomorrow, as we are your team every day. So according to Nick Underhill over at New Orleans Football, the Saints have signed Lucas Patrick, veteran offensive lineman. It's been 7 years in the NFL, 5 with the Green Bay Packers, as well as a pair most recently with the Chicago Bears. Now, of course, lots of Chicago Bear connections here as of late for this New Orleans Saints team, their signees, all those other things. 6'3", 313 pounds. Just to tell you a little bit about Lucas Patrick, he ran like a 5'2", not 4'2". That would be incredible. 5'2", I believe it was 5'2", 40-yard dash. So not the fastest guy, but has always sort of carried the tag throughout his career of being an athletic piece. Has a lot of experience in the zone run game. Has taken over 900 snaps on the offensive line when it comes to zone blocking schemes. That's more than 50% or more than 100% more. So more than double what he had did, how many snaps he's taken as a man blocker. Played a lot of snaps at center. The majority of his snaps at center. Has also played snaps at left guard and right guard. Has starts at all three of those positions. I think has like less than a handful of snaps at left tackle as well, one of the tackle spots. 0 sacks allowed in 2023, 25 total pressures allowed in 2023, with 3 of those being hits on the quarterback. He might have been the Chicago Bears, one of their best offensive linemen last year, but the bar was pretty low for that offensive line. But I do think that Lucas Patrick is an interesting prospect to add to this team. Was undrafted back in 2016 when he came in, and has started more than 50 games in the league, has appeared in more than 90. Kind of gives me the vibes of a James Hurst, who had a similar trajectory coming into the league. But of course, Hurst had the tackle flexibility in a way that I'm not super sure that a 6'3", 313 pound Lucas Patrick has, with only a handful of snaps or less than a handful of snaps playing at either one of those tackle positions. But I do see the value of him on the interior without a doubt. The Saints don't have a starting left guard right now. They have guys that you could project into that spot. They could move Aliudo inside, although I think he's better suited at tackle. They could have Nick Saldiveri starting there as he's recovered from that shoulder injury, or as he's working to recover from the shoulder injury. I'll say, I'm not sure if he's been cleared yet or anything, but we've seen him still like working, in the facility and stuff like that. And so him getting an opportunity at left guard makes a ton of sense. Saints traded all the way up to the very first pick of the day 3 in the 2023 NFL draft, top of the 4th round, so that they could start the 3rd round by drafting Nick Saldiveri. I think he'll get a real shot. Kyle Hergel is another guy that's come in as a UDFA that has stood out a bit, moves extremely well coming out of Boston College, has experience in those wide zone offenses, zone run blocking, all that. Saints also added veterans in Justin Herron as well as Shane Lemieux. Shane Lemieux being more of the interior offensive line fit, but Herron can move inside and out, has that team mentality of like, yeah, I'll play wherever they want me to play. It's fine. You know what I mean? Like being all about it. But Lemieux, obviously coming from, time with Saquon Barkley and the New York Giants, he's very accustomed to a run-heavy offense. Coming out of Oregon, he's very accustomed to a zone run offense as well. Kind of, was tagged as that guy coming out of college. So I could see the fit there. I think the Saints are doing a good job of at least having options on the interior. I still believe that they could solve the problem by simply signing Dalton Risner, but is signing Dalton Risner as simple as simply signing Dalton Risner, right? Does Dalton Risner want to sign right now? Remember, Risner waited a long time before he signed in season last year with the Minnesota Vikings. So there's a real opportunity to potentially grab him up off the market. But what if he's not super interested in signing right now? Like maybe he wants to wait until training camp because he doesn't want to get hurt during OTAs and mandatory minis, like once they get out of the voluntary portion, and instead wants to wait until he goes into training camp and all that. He's a proven guy. He's earned starting roles with several different coaching staffs and all that. I wouldn't blame him for just playing it a little bit more selective, waiting for there to be an open opportunity somewhere, whether by injury or attrition or whatever it might be, and then signing a little bit closer to the season where he doesn't have to do the wear and tear stuff. He can kind of focus and get ready for the season on his own and then move into a potential, more structured activities, setting, NFL activity setting. So we'll see what happens when it comes to Dalton Risner. He'll sign to some team eventually. He's good enough to start on a lot of teams, particularly on the interior where interior offensive line play isn't like spectacular around the NFL. And so getting a guy like Dalton Risner late in free agency, like that's hat tip to whoever ends up doing that. And ideally it's the New Orleans Saints because I feel like it's a guy that's connected to these guys quite a few ways, and all that. So do I think that Lucas Patrick could be a guy to contend for a starting role for the New Orleans Saints? I don't want to get super far ahead of all of those types of expectations, but do I think that he's a guy that deserves to be a little bit in part of that conversation? Yeah, he's incredibly experienced, has a lot of production at the position. Now, I did mention that he didn't allow any sacks, only 25 pressures, and 3 of which were hits last year. Those were all, if not certainly 90+% all came from the center spot. So that is something to consider, is that he had a really good year last year playing at center. And then all the other years, he kind of moved around a lot more. And so I would say that there's value in having another guy that can play center. That way it doesn't have to be Cesar Ruiz that's moving over, all those other things. So even if he doesn't end up winning a starting role with the Saints, but lands a roster spot, I think there's value in having that guy that can back up both your guard spots and your center spot, so that if something happens with Eric McCoy and he needs a playoff or needs a series off or needs a half off or whatever, then you end up having a guy like Lucas Patrick go in at center without having to upset a second position on your offensive line. If you're an everydayer, you've heard me kind of stand on my soapbox about this issue for the Saints for a long time, with not having a viable, typically not having a specific backup plan, a specified backup plan at center that doesn't disrupt another position. So I like the addition of Lucas Patrick. Let's wait and see how it all unfolds, but he seems like he'll be somebody that is a good fit with the system, that has good production throughout his time, and has the experience that you're looking for a guy that you might be able to plug and play at some point should you need that. So wouldn't be surprised to see him at least land a roster spot, and then we can see where things go from there. But the Saints are doing everything that they have to do to make sure that they know all of their options of potential combinations in the offensive line. And that's the important thing that they need to do. We've talked about it before. Draft athletes and then put your best guys out there wherever, they make sense. And so figuring out your versatility, figuring out and adding versatility, adding pieces, all that. This is what the Saints should be doing. So glad to see them do that. Now I'd just like to see a phone call to Dalton Reisner, or at least, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, maybe it's selfish, but you know, that's the guy that I still have like my sights set on, as like, yeah, man, he feels like he can solve a lot of your problems. But maybe the Saints feel like they've already solved their problem and we're just not caught up yet. So we'll see the way that it all goes. All right, y'all, we appreciate you very much for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to go and check out Jake Madison over at Locked On Pelicans, as well as Caroline Fitton over at Locked On LSU for your second listen today, as they get you ready for the Pelicans offseason and, of course, everything going on as we build up to LSU football's return. We appreciate you very much. As always, make a Locked On Saints part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your favorite team in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know the families living. Let me know how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation. I'll holla at you.